Welcome again to the new episode. Today we have an amazing guest with us, Ellie Cooper, who is acclaimed designer and also a founder and a creative director at Athena Productions. So thank you so much for being today here with us. And should we just jump straight into the first question? How did you start? Like, what was your beginning?
Yeah, of course. So thank you very much for having me. So I started when I was probably 10 years old.
Oh.
That's a long time ago now. But I saw a photo of a horse that was like jumping over a waterfall, and obviously that was unreal. And I thought, how on earth has someone done that? And I went to my dad and said to him, how's somebody done this? And he said to me, oh, in Photoshop. And
Mm.
so I said to him, like, well, do you have Photoshop? And this was back when they were on, CDs, and that's how you had your license. And he gave me a CD that he had, an old version of Photoshop, and I started using Photoshop. And then I said to my dad, like, I don't understand, like, I can't really get home pressure working. And you know eventually, after bugging him, he bought me a really tiny tablet, the
Mm.
not the screen ones, those weren't even around back then, but it was one of the pad ones. And from there I just was working on artwork like that. It was mostly just, painting like horses or animals or things like that.
Mm.
And then eventually, when I was probably 15, 16, I was trying to consider what to do with my life as 15, 16-year-olds do. And I was like, well, what's something that, I could enjoy. And one of my brothers, he had worked in the video game industry that years and years ago at
Mm.
Sony London. And he mentioned, like, well, why don't you go into games? Like, you would enjoy it. Because I loved watching people play games. I played games, but I loved watching my older brothers play games because I really loved the art and, loved the lighting. And I didn't really put two and two together back then, but I found a local university that did 3D games art. And I went there for 3 years, I believe it was. It feels like a lifetime ago. And from there, I left university and I just went off as a freelance concept artist.
Mhm.
And I worked as a freelance concept artist for numerous years. And I was very fortunate to work with a lot of really fantastic clients like Disney and NPC and Sony, Microsoft, all sorts. And one of the things that I do a lot is I use Unreal Engine for concept art. And that started to get me really booked up, and that was fantastic. And I was starting to have to turn people away because they were saying, could you use Unreal Engine for your concept art? And I was having to say, sorry, no, I'm booked here, there, or everywhere. And eventually I just said, you know what, I have this artist that's really good, perhaps we could do it that way. And that's how Athena Productions was formed. It was kind of started off as a team of artists, and then eventually it was like, okay, actually we need to legitimize this and make it a full company, and happened very organically.
Okay.
Amazing.
So, yeah, before we jump into all of that jazz with Athena, how did you exactly, like more in depth, I guess, went into that way of doing concept and, all this stuff like that? I always ask about it because that part, the early part is very crucial. That's what at least I think.
Mm.
Um, when you went to uni, I guess there was no concept art courses. There's always some bits and bobs, like sort of going around the subject of concept art, like, animation or like some kind of game development or graphic design or whatever. Um, Knowing that you wanted to go for games, like how did you discover concept art in the first place? Like, was it for forums? Like, because you obviously love to draw, but
Mm.
like, what was the thing that sort of you're like, ah, that's
Yeah.
that's something that I should go for because that's, achievable.
Mhm.
Yeah, I really didn't know until I joined university. I didn't know there was a name for it. I was doing it, but I didn't know there was actually a name for it. And when I went to university, they had obviously the modules in the course, and there was a teacher there called Mitch Small. And he just started to teach the basics, like values and
Right.
composition. And
Mm.
I didn't even really understand, like, you kind of start doing these things through just looking, but until you actually learn the fundamentals and the theory of it, then you're like, oh, I understand why things look better on the thirds and not in the center of the canvas. And that really helped. And then he was able to tell me like, well, that's what a concept artist does. It was like, oh, that's what I can do as a job. And then I understood that I could just be a concept artist going forwards. So yeah, it was years of not knowing what I was or what I was doing. I think my parents just thought I was just painting unicorns upstairs in my bedroom, like constantly. And I think they were probably concerned, where's this going? But yeah, that's how I probably discovered that concept artist was a legitimate job.
Oh, okay, just for the university. That's very interesting. And it's a very organic way too, if you think about it, just going to university and somebody just, yeah, that's actually very cool. So, like between that, and I'm gonna, dig even deeper. Between that, like after university, you've said you've dropped out. If I heard it correct before.
No, so I did finish.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry for that. Okay, you did finish it. Like
Yes.
obviously knowing about concept art and then the sort of next level of, creating your portfolio and applying for jobs, or you said you're a freelancer. So actually getting some recognition and starting to work on your first project. How did that happen? Because
It didn't
that's something
happen.
that's something, sorry for interrupting. That's something that a lot of people are struggling with to actually
Mm,
understand the process. I think it's one of the hardest things to get, like, well, some people are lucky, lucky
mm,
or luckier, more lucky.
yeah.
But like what was the thing that sort of, got
Mhm.
you the first job, if you know what I'm asking for?
When I left university, I think I thought it was going to be easy to find a job, and it absolutely wasn't. You leave university and you think your portfolio is perfect, and it absolutely isn't. It's not what employers are looking for. And that was a hard reality. And so I was working at a software company answering phones every
Mm.
day, and then in the evenings I'd be doing like mentorships. I found mentorships were absolutely fantastic, like this one-on-one tuition you used to get, and also the reality you used to get from it. You'd say to somebody, what is it like? And they'd actually tell you rather than a class. And I found that really interesting. And it became, I'd put stuff up on ArtStation, and eventually, as I kept putting stuff up on ArtStation, I'd get messages from people who were just private clients in the beginning, just private people who hadn't got companies. They just wanted maybe D&D art, Dungeons and Dragons characters or things like that, or environments. And I'd help that. And then eventually, slowly but surely, it began to be companies. And then it got to be bigger companies. And then it got to be like movie projects and then video games. And it wasn't an overnight success or things that just happened. It was, a few years of, just doing personal work
Mm.
between my like 9 to 5 job and doing it that way, and eventually I had enough commissions, or I had somebody to say like, could we have you for the next year? And I'd be like, okay, well, I can leave my job then, and that was, the chance to jump, but it wasn't easy, and it wasn't, it was scary, scary just jumping into the unknown as well.
Mhm. So I'm wondering because like a lot of our guests are almost saying the same thing. Either they studied something completely else, like architecture, or they say that the stuff they teach, they learned at school is not necessary for their career. What's your opinion on that? If you would go back in time, would you go to university again?
Oh, it's a difficult one. I mean,
Hmm.
it was a good way to grow up. I
Mm-hmm.
think, when you're coming straight from school, it was a good way to, have, because I don't think anyone would have told me what concept art was if I didn't go. I could have found the answers on my own, but I don't think I knew what I was looking for. I don't think I knew. But the problem is sometimes a lot of institutions, they don't have people that they're not in the industry, and the industry moves so quick, even if it's films or video games or even advertising, it all changes so quickly that, but a year or two out, you're behind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and because there's new software coming in, or you know there's new bits or pieces that have like new information that's come in and changed the way the industry works. And also, I think that you need to have a constant understanding of what art directors are looking for, or what people who are hiring, what they're looking for all the time. You need to be working towards that. And I think some learning institutions don't realize that. I think some are really fantastic for that, like places like New Edge. I've
Mm.
found like their work, all their students that come out of them, I'm always like really blown away by their caliber of students. but I think other people, other institutions, they might not keep up to date or know how to best help that student if they want to be a concept artist or a 3D artist, trying to cover all those disciplines in one place, like with one instructor, I think must be really challenging.
Hmm.
Right. Yeah, that totally makes sense. And it's like I, I I always love to hear those, not like what you've said. I think is very important. It was not an overnight success. And I'm still like, we're all doing the sort of, similar journeys in some ways. Listening to other people, we all have like sort of similarities. It's not,
Yes.
well, but like, you know what I mean? Like hearing that thing where you said you worked 9 to 5, normal job, and then you came back and you still did portfolio. Like I personally, maybe some people will kill me for that, but I love hearing about it. Like it's
Mm.
just because like doing that, like it must be stressful in a way because it's sort of like a reality of unknown. You're pushed by that fantasy almost that
Mm.
you're gonna get job. So
Yeah.
you're doing it over. Well, you're doing overtimes basically, right? There's some
Mm.
fun involved too, obviously, and some love for the game. But you've said it took you how long, more or less, like during that
Mm.
period of time?
It probably took me a couple of years to break in. And at one point, I burned myself out really badly because I
Mm.
was like waking up at 5 a.m., working on concept art, going to work from 9 to 5, then from 6 o'clock to 11 o'clock, I'd be trying to work again. And I just couldn't, like, it's just knackering, and I think that really shook my confidence when that happened because I thought I didn't want to do art anymore. I thought I wasn't like destined to do it. And obviously I got there, but that was really hard. I think people don't tell you that, you know, I remember talking to somebody from Ubisoft at that time when I was doing that sort of work, and they said to me that they used to work in a factory and they'd pull the same hours I did until they got in. That was just a sacrifice people make. And I don't think they tell you that there is this risk as well that, you could really burn yourself out too, before you even get in the industry.
Hmm.
That's very interesting thing here. If I think to hear as well, you might get burned, like literally burned out. Yeah, I mean that's constant sort of quality. I don't kind of really put it into words, but this sort of like it's not motivation's discipline, definitely, right?
Mm.
Um, and to me, listening to all of you guys, and it's like it's so inspiring to this day. I'm like, what am I doing? You know, like even later on in your career, you're like, God damn, I want to do like it's like a fuel,
Mm.
keeps me thinking about it, and it's very good because I think that's a real sort of people some people can relate to it, right? Like it's not easy. It's definitely not.
Hmm.
No.
Yeah, but I think it's really great to hear that. I think it was the same for me. Like it took me almost like 5 years from when I pick up my tablet to actually going freelance full time. So
Yeah, same here.
yeah, I think it's important to just, let people know, especially to the younger guys starting out, that it can take time. So
Yeah.
yeah, don't give up if it doesn't happen overnight for you. Just yeah, if this is your dream, just go for it. So yeah,
Yeah.
after this time, what was your first big project?
Oh, I'm trying to think now.
Yeah.
It's like oh God, I don't even know what it will be. I mean, there's so many that were really, like, they were private commissions that felt really big at the time,
Hmm.
and I think the big first one was Disney's Snow White, that I got taken onto, and that was a really fantastic experience. And then probably like the next one after that for me was probably Helldivers 2. And that was fantastic to work on. Seeing the reception of that was just really, really magical. And that's something that I was really proud of. But as you guys know, there's so many that you'll never be able to speak about,
Hmm.
that were really special and really amazing to work on. And then you hear that they've been cut, and it's like, oh no, like all
Yes.
that work and all that teamwork and all the inspiration from it, it's all gone, but that's just part and parcel of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the virtue of our jobs, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah, this is
So
also something that we have to make peace with, right? Like sometimes we
yeah,
spend like a half a year working on something, and like it doesn't matter if you did a great job on it, it could never see the light of day. Yeah, we have to
yeah, it's
accept
also
it.
collaboration, right? Like it's you work with a lot of people and everybody has something to say, so it's just like it's a bunch of people doing, stuff all together.
Mhm.
So now you're obviously a concept artist that's been working for multiple, well, you've worked with multiple companies, you've worked in big places and small places. You obviously are creator of Athena. Um, how well you've sort of said, already touched, around a bit. Like it sort of happened organically, the sort of creation of your concept art studio, and it's a like just solely concept art studio, just so I get it right.
Yeah, we also offer UI, UX stuff as well now.
Yeah, here it is. So how did that exactly happen? Like, did you just get too much work and then just said, well, you know, like you've just said, here's an artist, I might do something with it too. So how did it turn around basically?
Yeah, I mean, exactly. I mean, what happened was that, like you said, I was getting really busy, and there were projects coming in that I just couldn't say no to. They were just too, too great, or too much of a good opportunity. And I'd always wanted my own company, and I saw the opportunity of having more artists, but still being involved because the clients, some of them were repeat clients, said to me, well, we want to work with you, Ellie, we want to work again, and I was having to turn them away, and I hate saying no
Mm,
to those sort of people. So I was like, you know what, like I have this artist, they're really fantastic. I will be helping as well. I'll be like almost art directing it. And they were really happy with that. And it just started to become where, that those first few projects, it was like, actually, you know what, this has legs. And so Athena Productions was incorporated, made, and I've not looked back since. And it's been such an enjoyable experience, actually. It's been fantastic.
Amazing. I have a question. Since you are actually in a hiring position, right? Like, what would you
Mm.
like to see in a in a concept art portfolio these days? Because I have a feeling like it changed over years. Like there was like a boom for photo bash and then for 3D and everything. Do you think the trends changed over time? Like there are like a different requirements like a few years ago?
I think so. I think one of the things is, seeing AI in portfolios is not a great thing at the moment. Obviously, AI is a pretty big thing, and the copyright issues and things like that. I don't really want to see any AI in your portfolio, for one. But seeing your photo bashing and your 3D skills is really important. There is never really a project that we don't use 3D, and you need to be able to photo bash, because doing everything in 3D, it can take absolutely hours. So there has to be some point that you cut off and say, right, I need to render it, and now I need to photo bash those of things in. But there always has to be as well breakdowns of what you do. So um, breakout sheets, turnarounds, seeing your references, sketches, and things like
Mm.
that. That's all really helpful to see how you think and how you actually solve a problem, because we solve problems. It's not every day that we just get to paint pretty images. Sometimes we have to really problem solve, for a brief. And sometimes the briefs are really, really narrow. Sometimes they're really wide. And we have to kind of start narrowing that brief down to try and help the client find their perfect image or visual or something like that, or perfect design.
Mhm. Yeah, I think it's especially true for freelancers, right? Like maybe we are often get hired for pre-production or maybe like a blue sky phases, and then being quick with your concepts, like you said, like doing
Mm.
3D may sometimes takes a lot of time, and doing quick sketches might be more beneficial. So I think it's also
Yeah.
like a good to know on which projects or maybe like on what specific thing you would like to work on, right? And then tailor your portfolio specifically to that.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, like you say, tailoring it is really important, tailoring it that you're not a a character, concept artist, an environment, and a vehicle all in one. It's really, especially when you're just starting out. I think when you get more senior, you can start to branch out to those. But I think when you're junior, trying to be a generalist is really difficult,
Mm-hmm.
and it will take you longer. I think just focusing on one thing is really beneficial as well. I want to see what you enjoy working on. If you enjoy working on environments or characters or the vehicles, I like to see that, and then I can best decide which projects would be best suited to you.
I'm so
Yeah.
happy you just said that, because I was always advocating for just do what you love and the work will find you. Obviously,
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, I really think like you have like a different energy if you present a portfolio that you're really proud of. And
Yeah.
and like, for example, if I would present like maybe some characters, it's switching again like in my mind, but this is a different topic. But like if I would present some characters right now and then like 200 of my environments, like obviously it would be like a completely different energy coming out from me. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you might not enjoy the work. And that's something that I actually found when using Unreal Engine, because I was really struggling to use Blender and more technical programs. And so I was like, I really enjoyed Unreal. And I think I was trying to fit in with what everyone else was using. And I thought, actually, you know what? I'm just going to use it. If I get the work done, who cares which program it's done in? And actually, after I did that, life became so much easier. And it seemed like opportunities were actually coming to me a lot easier, because I think I wasn't fighting, trying to force myself into being super technical or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Awesome.
Okay. And that's something that you've touched on as well, which is very interesting. Because seeing how the industry evolved to what it is at the moment with, well, at least in my experience, people came to the artist. Now, in my case, it might be different for everybody, obviously, but it's sometimes you have to look for work, right? You have to network with people. Uh, and that's sort of an important step in our journey. And I think a lot of people are struggling
Mhm.
with it, especially the upcoming artists. Um, so I wanted to ask you, because you're obviously creator Latina, like, well, I'm gonna put it simple. Well, obviously you have some experience, so it might be different, but do clients come to you now, or is it
Mhm.
still this kind of, communication process with networking, with, connecting with people, or going to events and just,
Mhm.
basically touching first base, I would say, right? Like,
Yeah.
how is it in your experience?
Something that I think it's quite similar for freelancers and studios, is that you always need to be running it as though it's a business. You need to be selling, you need to be marketing, you need to be networking, going to events. A company is no different. We do marketing. So, at Athena, we have blogs, we have a YouTube channel, you know, and we do a lot of social media posts. We do outreach. We have people who reach out to us, and it's making sure that we go to network events. We try to go to as many as we can. And I think it's very similar for both. I think that's something that I learned during my freelance time as well, that you need to be thinking of it as a business of one, and running it like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different in a company.
Yeah, right. It's almost like a different skill too. Like you have to like it's sort of like selling yourself in a way,
Yeah.
becoming a seller and just like trying to because a lot of these people, like that's what I've noticed. A lot of the clients don't even know what it is. They don't know what ArtStation is. I mean, some of
Mm.
them probably do. Obviously, there's this vast, client sort of packed in a bag, like they know what's going around. But there's a lot that like they don't have a clue where to even look for people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why, people need to have some form of social media. I
Yeah.
think, have an art station or have Instagram or Kara or, anything that means that somebody could just stumble across your work. That's how you get found, especially for freelance work or even for recruiting. A lot of the time when we're looking for artists to work on projects, I'll go on ArtStation and I'll look through artists, look through their likes, for example, and see. And that's how I kind of start to like link different people together. I'm like, oh, that I've never seen this person before. What do they do? And then we add them to like a list, or we get in contact. You always have to have some form of social media
Mm.
presence.
And
Absolutely.
that's something that I wanted to ask too, because I know from a friend of mine, like, and I've heard it numerous times that it's actually hard, even though we have like the market is sort of, I don't want to say oversaturated, it's a bad word. I think we have a lot of artists, essentially. We have a way more concept people that we ever had. Well, how hard it is to find a person to work for a job that you're offering. Like, is it actually super, super hard? Is it easy because of
Yeah.
ArtStation? Is it like, you know,
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of things go into it as well. We find people on
yes,
ArtStation, and then of course, like, we get them in and everything, and it all goes fantastic. But there's also this soft skill that you have to have, that you have to be really easy to get along with. Enthusiastic people love them. People that, you say, "Oh, can you change this?" And they go like, "Yeah, no problem, I'm on it." It's like fantastic. And those sort of people, they go really far. They are the people that get the repeat clients. They find themselves like on bigger and bigger projects because this enthusiasm and this just kindness and team ethic that they have. It's something that I think people forget as well. But finding people on ArtStation, it's really easy to find people. But it's impossible to find you, like I said, if you're not on anything. But we do get people that do, send in their work, because of course there was, issues a long time ago with AI and ArtStation, and some people are still off of ArtStation and they have their own websites. And if you have your own website, I will say that, you need to put that in places where people can find it as well. Even if it's on, for example, if you have an ArtStation, but you just link your new website, or if you have an Instagram, or if you do blogs, for example, on your website, that's something that means you can get found through Google and search engines, things like that.
Hmm. Yeah, it's almost like the more the better, right? Like the more social media presence you have, the higher the chances that someone will find you eventually. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's how I got found for a lot of my work, was I'd post a new image and then somebody would email me like a week later saying, "Oh, I saw your latest image. Are you free,
Hmm.
for some work?" And it's just like, it's almost like feeding the algorithm, but you know, it's what you have to do, isn't it?
so as much as we shouldn't shoot for likes, the likes gives you visibility, right? It's almost
It
like it's
does.
sort of
Yeah.
ironic. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's not for the ego, because some people think, oh, you care
Yeah.
about likes. Yes, but not because I want to feed my ego. It's because of the visibility and the possible jobs that will come my way. Hopefully,
Oh
if
yeah.
I post more, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Because then it's on the trending, and then and you don't know what art director will see that, and that's kind of what you're hoping for. But there was a long time that I'd never hit the trending like at all, and I still found jobs. It doesn't mean that everything you have to post is like super viral, or anything like that. That people do find you if you kind of keep updating your portfolio and keep posting, and keep looking around for jobs, keep marketing yourself.
yes, I agree. Ellie, so what kind of advice would you give to people who are maybe studying right now or fresh out of uni? I mean, in regards of what should they learn or what should they present in their portfolio, like maybe going very specific, like should they have like a complete project, like a original IP, or maybe base it on something that's already existing, or
Yeah.
what's your take on that?
Yeah, of course. So having quality over quantity, absolutely. Having 3 pieces that are fantastic over 40 pieces are a lot more important to what we look for. If you have one image, that doesn't really speak to your consistency. So you need more than one. But, having 6 or so that are, absolute top notch. And in terms of IP, especially depending on which studio you're applying for, something that I always recommend is to go and look at their artists that are currently employed there. So especially juniors, you can go and find the juniors that are currently working there, or their mids, or even their seniors, and take a look at their art style and take a look at, what they do, maybe composition. Do they do more photo bashing, more 3D, more just painting overall? And that's a great indication to see what the hiring level is. Um, like I said, make sure you look up that company, make sure that you're not creating pixel art for a company that loves to do first person shooters.
Mhm.
Make sure you're tailoring your work to them. And oh, I had one more. I had one more that I usually say. Um, oh, it's gone now.
Happens.
Yeah, there's just so many. But yeah, so those are kind of the ones that I normally recommend. And in terms of like, oh, that's what's going to say IPs, trying to do the same IP as other studios. A lot of the time, that's come and gone that time. So for example, some studios they worked on a fantasy game before, and now they've moved on to a sci-fi. So you
Mhm.
do a fantasy art isn't going to fill in to what they're working on now. So that's why I say to look at their artists. Try and show that you're able to work on the fantasy and the sci-fi, because a lot of these companies are investing in you long term, not just for the one project. So that's why they hire freelancers in, for the short term. So make sure that you're able to help on the next project, the project after that, whether it's sci-fi or fantasy or whatever. And those are kind of like my recommendations for people's portfolios.
So it's more about almost matching a style than the IP, right? Like you said, like going with the pixel art for a company like a AAA, doing AAA games. You might get lucky, but probably not.
No.
Yeah.
No, and I would say that that's an important one. I think that matching just their like what you've seen of their previous games, like kind of that aesthetic is really helpful to see. Copying, previous images that they've done, or maybe what their concept artists have done, like copying it and just redoing it, isn't very helpful. It proves that you're a good copier, but not that you're a good, like, you have original ideas or can problem solve on your own. A single image that you may see from, for example, like Ubisoft's like Shadow, New Assassin's Creed Shadows. You haven't seen the problem solving that it took to get to that point. So you've kind of skipped out this problem solving if you just copy it. Maybe you do something set in, I don't know, Mongolia, and it's an Assassin's Creed set in Mongolia, and do something like that. And you kind of change enough details that it still feels like you're paying homage to them, but not that you're trying to go one to one. I think that's a good way round of doing it.
Yeah.
That's actually very good to hear too. Like especially for the people that there's this kind of a process where nowadays it's just you go online and you want to do something now, right? But it takes time, like to
Mm.
develop a sort of concept that you don't see what's going in the background, right? Like you don't
Yeah.
see all the sort of like, oh, we cannot have, this element here because it doesn't make any sense. And like it usually there's some kind of a development process in between with people that are working on it.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah. And that's a frustration that people have spoken to me about, where they say, we just see all the pretty images at the end. What happens to the turnarounds? And it's like, well, we often can't show you the initial explorations of a project because there's 20 images in there that weren't used, and those 20 are now under, they're being protected for maybe a future game, or
yes.
or they're just saving it for something else. You don't get to see that iteration. And I think people see these end images like these images at the end, and they think that that's what concept art is. And I understand the frustration, they can't see that iterative side. Sometimes you go through, like, I've known projects where somebody's had to do 2 or 3 months of exploration on like a vehicle, just going and going and going and going until they got the perfect one, and they can never show those vehicles that came before, and I think that's very frustrating that juniors can't see that in their in portfolios or on ArtStation to give them a better idea of what the job is.
Yeah, right. And that's also very like it all brings us to this one thing where I think it's very important to touch upon it as well, where you should like sort of not feel too attached to the image, right? Like
Yeah.
it's changing all the time. Like I
Mm.
personally, for example, when you're doing like that's the power of 3D, right? Like just showing some screen grabs or whatever, so you don't finish it first, and then it
Yes.
comes back, and then there's frustration coming, like, why? Like it's coming back again. I wanted to,
Yeah.
finish it and just let it go, but like now we have to, you know, change the office setup, man,
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
something. I don't know. Um, do you think it's also a virtue where like, well, it's sort of self-explanatory, but I'm still gonna ask it, where you're not treating it like illustration versus
Mm.
an actual visual development. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's important that you're able to understand that it will come back and forth. There will be feedback and there will be this iterative process, and understanding that people aren't against you. It's not personal, it's for the project. And I think if people kind of align themselves to that, where it's like, it's for the project to make it as good as it possibly can be, that can help, you know, going back and having to redo a load of stuff or even having to scrap it after you've been on it for months on end or even days on end or you feel like it's going really well and all of a sudden they're like no, cut it, not going in the right direction. And I think it's important that you just got to go like, hey, no worries, what's next, and just move on. And I think, like you say, there is this almost visual development and illustration, sometimes they feel almost the same and then completely different at times. And it's really, when
Yes.
somebody said to me sometimes, can you explain the difference? I was like, I can kind of show you like what the difference is, but trying to explain it sometimes is like really difficult because you see like marketing art and they're like, how is this not illustration? It's like, okay, right, let's kind of like go back through the process and then maybe we start to see that it's had some iterative. But then when you look at illustrative work, sometimes it's like, oh well, we did a load of iterative stuff before we did the illustration. And I think sometimes that can be really confusing, like the differences. I think they've got a lot closer over the years.
Mhm.
Right. That's very true. And like it's kind of funny too because do you feel like you obviously work with a lot of clients, so I think you're the perfect person for that, you know, question. Do you think like there's no well, there's obviously some specific workflows that we have in order to achieve what, we're doing, but a
Mhm,
lot of clients, wouldn't you say, they have their sort of own way, like their own ways of working, and you sometimes have to, adhere to that. Where it's like
mhm,
an illustration for one company, and the sort of outcome is completely different for the other company.
mhm.
And that's where these kind of boundaries are, you know, getting lost in a way because of just the
Yeah.
variety of people that you work with.
Yeah, I think so. Like I say, everyone's got a different way of working. Everyone's got a different way of how they give back, give feedback out. And I think it's just remaining really flexible, and just,
Yes.
because I found that normally it's, sketches, then color, like color sketches, and then you go into the final, and then there's all this like feedback obviously in between all of these steps. But there's always this structure to it. You always are kind of going like in the same structure, no matter like how somebody works. It's always very, very similar, I found. So I I take comfort in the structure of, knowing where like what the end goal is as well.
Mhm.
Right, that's very important, right? To have like sort of your own workflow that you know it will work.
Yes,
Imagine the opposite,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
I hate to think of it.
Yeah.
If that's okay with you, I would like to go back a little bit to your personal life. Like you mentioned that your brother worked at Sony, right? Did I get it right?
Mhm.
Did you
Yes.
did you get a chance to work together with him, like in the last years, like on the same project?
Yeah, no, I didn't in the end. He left the industry to go and like pursue other bits and pieces that he was interested in, but he worked at like Sony London, I think 20, 30 years ago. So in its real prime, when it was,
Mm.
I think it did, is it Black Monday? It was like a game back then, and he went and photographed a lot of the like London Underground and things like that for the game and other bits and pieces. So that was quite cool.
So yeah, and
30 years ago. That's
yeah.
that's so insane. I'm like, it truly is a golden time. I mean, but is it I guess today is kind of like we have all the news of the, like the sort of recession of,
Mm,
gaming industry, and I guess it's not just the gaming
Hmm.
industry.
mm.
Um a lot of stuff is happening around, obviously. How, like, in the sea of bad news, how do you approach it? I know it's just such a general question, and I'm like, feel like a journalist.
Mm.
What would you do?
I
Well,
mean,
just relaxed conversation. You don't have to
yeah,
answer.
I, it will get better. You know,
Mm.
it will get better. You know, if you kind of obviously it's happening to people now, and it doesn't feel like it, and I totally understand. And it can be it can be difficult for for people to hear it, and I'm not living that reality. You know, some people are in real dire straits, and it's really horrible seeing how many people have been laid off. But it will end. And there will be this reallocation of artists being almost reallocated who have been laid off to different studios. And these games, they have to be finished. These films, they have to be finished. And they will have to bring in artists again, to finish it off, or, that they will gain their confidence back again and it will even out. There's been so many times where the economy has like dipped through the years and then it comes back up. It always comes back up, and we've almost got to ride the down to then ride the up. And, you have to keep positive that like this isn't forever, it will end. You know, we're seeing where people are starting to gain their confidence back
Mm.
with creating games or starting to reinvest in games or things like that. So it will get better. Just keep your eye out on opportunities and keep marketing yourself as we've discussed, and networking, and it will improve. Absolutely.
Sort of like a bullish and bearish market. You're like in a dip now, but I mean, it's almost also like, uh, and I know it might sound a bit arrogant, but it's almost like the best time to just create, and just keep leveling up in a way. Um, I mean, I would say some stuff about what's happening in the movie industry, and it's like it's all over the place.
Yeah, yeah, the strikes have
um,
done a number on him, really.
and I know a lot of people are struggling too.
Mhm.
To like, I'm in the opposite spectrum, so I'm very happy with it, obviously, and I'm feeling sad at the same time. But yeah, I don't know where I'm going with it. I don't want to be in this sort of like a dooming character now. It's definitely gonna straighten itself up, and I think it's just market is just correcting itself, in a way. I don't think it's AI too, by the way. I know Camila's probably like, Patrick, stop talking about AI. You've been mentioning it here and there now.
If you
Um,
want to go into this direction for our next guest, we will
no,
invite someone and we will talk hours straight about AI.
yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, AI is a difficult one. I think it
It
can make
is.
art.
It's
I
very
think it can
difficult.
make life more easy in terms of being able to use it for like transcribing meetings or things like that. Um, but the way it's currently used in video games or even films, it's upsetting for the artist. It's upsetting for an artist personally. Um, and kind of just seeing all of our work be funneled in, and just being able to type your name and saying, like, make me an artwork in the style of like Ellie Cooper, and literally it's
Mhm.
spitting out an exact image with only a few changes, and you can identify it. I remember that happening and being so like furious and upset that that had happened, and it's just daylight robbery,
Mhm.
and that's really, really sad. Um, but it'll be interesting to see over the next few years, because we have plenty of clients that come to us and say, we don't want you to use AI. You don't use AI, right? And it's like, no, absolutely not. We've had clients that come to us with it in their contracts saying, you will not use AI because of the copyright issue. And that's something that has, protected a lot of the industry. And also it can't problem solve, this whole thing of concept artists being able to problem solve things. And, we're able to take a brief and keep solving and keep going, while an AI, while it might be great in the early pitches potentially for some indie devs, so they don't have to spend the money. Eventually, it's unusable, in 3D. A character in 3D, a character that's been
Mhm.
done with AI. You give it to a 3D artist, and they're just like, some of these things don't connect. I don't understand how this works. And then somebody might come to you and say, could you do a new version that actually sorts all this out? You
Yeah.
know, and I think that's an interesting development.
Yeah, I think it
Um,
could almost be used by like non-artist people to maybe show or communicate clearly their vision. But like I
Mm.
said, I'm against it because of the ethical side of thing. Like, how was it built right now? Yeah, but let's not go there. This is like a topic for a
why
different.
not?
Yeah, no, please, no, no, no.
No, it's a sort of a like a you go there and it's like a never-ending tunnel, definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes, Ellie, I'm really curious because you have worked on so many projects. Like, do you still have like a something that you're chasing, like a dream project or something that you would really love to do?
Oh, great question. Oh, I don't know. There's so many that I'd love to contribute to. Like Assassin's Creed or God of War, things like that. Those are all absolutely fantastic IPs. But I really, for me, a lot of it is the enthusiasm of clients. That is it's so infectious. Them being really, really keen and, they absolutely adore their project. And those are some of the most fun to work with because they just have so much passion for it. And I think potentially having the opportunity one day to maybe even, do our own project, our own, game or, I don't know,
Yes.
virtual slice or something like that would be really fun one day. I read a lot of books and a lot of fantasy books. I'm like, I want this to be a game. There's one in particular I
Oh,
really want to be a game that's called like Empire of the Vampire, and I want it to be a game.
Mm.
It's very brutal, that book, and it would be a great, great game. And I think that'd be really fun to work on, to be able to work on a game like that and then release it. But obviously it's a lot of work
Yeah.
to create anything like that. So, maybe the opportunity will present itself one day.
It's
yeah,
it's
but
from me for a vampire game.
Yes.
hell yeah. It's also nice to touch upon that because with time the sort of tools developed in a way where it's getting easier and easier to sort of do that, like, even with Unreal, right?
Mhm.
But going back a bit, um, like Camila touched upon this thing where what's the next project. So I'm quite sure you already have few projects that you were like, yes, that was so good. How do you find yourself after completing one? Like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes it might be you hit your highs and then
Mm.
like it's done and you
Yeah.
feel like it's done and like what's next? Right? Like
Yeah.
what happens then?
I mean, we're very lucky that we're always like rolling onto the next thing, onto the next thing, onto the next thing. But
Nice.
it's always nice at the end, that you've done a great job, you've done a good job, and clients are saying to you like, it's been a pleasure working with you, and it's been really nice, and that that feels like a wrap up to me. Even if the project's still ongoing, because of course with concept art you might not be there the full time of the
Mm.
project. So, once we finish and they're like, oh, it's been really good, or this, that, and the other, or perhaps they might post our work on their marketing, side, that's always really special as well. Even though we're not allowed to say like, that's our work, at that time, it's always really special. For me, I'm really, I'm really service based as a person. Like I really enjoy dealing with the clients and making people really happy and making sure that we give as best a service as we can. And that really served me well as a freelancer. The kind of like account management side has always been really fun for me. And that is normally when I feel like it's a job well done. But you kind of have to separate when you finish that project. You've got to put that in a box and say, like, right now we've got to learn a whole new art direction and we've got to do it like now. And that takes a lot of skill as well with our concept artists, that they're able to kind of switch from one and understand the demands of another. And that's where I think artists have to, especially concept artists, they have to be really capable of pivoting very, very quickly, especially if you're being a freelancer or working in an outsourcing studio. You have to be able to just pivot to whatever project it is, whether it's a fantasy or a
Mm.
sci-fi or like a first person shooter. Like there's different rules for every project. Some clients, they don't want capes because they clip through the bottom of
Mhm.
a character, or they don't want a certain color because it doesn't do very well for accessibility reasons, and all these things we have to consider, or whether there's a certain art style, an art, like we might be given a whole art Bible to understand, and it's really important that we're able to very quickly like download that and move on to the next one.
Right. And something popped in my mind too. Um, you obviously worked freelance solo, then you have your, own studio. How, like, your kind of involvement, that's the first thing, changed?
Mm.
And like most of the freelancers, well, not all obviously, but most of us are just like going it from a different way. How long are you doing, like, how long are you working for a client now versus
Mm.
sort of solo back then? Like, did it change? Is there any
Mhm.
difference, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so I don't really do art anymore. I do a lot of
Okay.
personal. I try to carry on and do personal artwork as much as I can. But some people, I think they'd struggle potentially to stop doing the art. And some people like me, I really enjoy the management side and, like I said, the account management and helping people. I do a lot of selling and marketing, and they're very different hats compared to doing art.
Mhm.
So I've had to adopt those, and that's been a really interesting transition, but something I really, really enjoy. And I love selling. That's something that's really, I really enjoy that. And other people, they'd absolutely hate it, selling, and that's kind of a new like reality you have to kind of come to terms with when you're running like a outsourcing team or your own business, or, something like that. And then in terms of the project, I'd say it probably is the same as when you're freelance. Sometimes you might be booked on a project for 3 weeks, 6 months, a year, 2 years, even longer sometimes, depending on the development or what you're doing in the development of a video game or film. It can really change. So I think that in terms of like how long the contracts last, it's probably, from what I remember, probably quite similar.
Okay,
Mhm.
interesting.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I will be going with another personal question. Sorry.
It's
That's
okay.
good.
Yeah, because I was just thinking back to the burnout stage of your career, because like it happened to me also, and like to many of my colleagues. So I was thinking like, what do you do right now to balance it out? Like, what do you do for your mental health and for the
Ooh.
work-life balance?
It's a constant struggle. I think this I've listened to like loads of like podcasts and things about this where people, talk about work-life balance, and I'm not sure there is one, because it seems to imply that there's like this perfect like balance between the two, and it's never there. Sometimes you find that like it, especially as freelancers, like you have like loads of free time compared to, like all the work responsibilities, and you know I try as much as I can to have hobbies outside of work. Some people are able to just do their art is their hobby, and I'm super jealous because they just are beasts
Mm.
trying to get their work done. They just do loads of like personal work, and I'm still here like 5 months later noodling on the same image that
Mm.
I've like just barely like have started. But I try and I do lots of things outside. I read a lot. Like I said, I exercise. I actually own a horse, so that keeps
Oh.
me away from the PC sometimes. And I try to just make sure that I'm not constantly at my PC. I mean, my phone is always on me, so I'm getting emails or messages on LinkedIn and things like that. And sometimes I think that's where you say that the balance slips.
Hmm.
And that's okay. That's part and parcel of kind of being like a founder, especially. You're kind of always online, and that's fine by me. But I think trying to make sure that you have those moments, like, for example, where I go and read for a while and, try and do something other than being at my PC, that can really help.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
that's like, I love when you put that thing where you're keeping your phone all the time. Like, I'm pretty much the same when your client, calls you or something, and you're like, I don't want to miss that call. It's
No,
like
no,
you
not at
definitely
all.
don't want to, and the balance is sort of losing itself. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine where you're in a position where you're actually managing people, because that's very
Mhm.
responsible too when you're, doing it all behind the scenes, all the stuff.
Mhm. Yeah.
Um, but how, like, hearing, that you have other, well, hobbies and things that you do outside, how important it is to you to keep those things, you know, on the same page as like art, let's say. Right? Like, is it important to you to just, caress your horse? That's so awesome, by the way.
Yes.
Is that the word? Caress? Like, take care of your horse?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
even
like
know.
take care and
Okay.
like ride
Yes.
the horse and go and
Yeah.
like groom him,
That's
pat him, you know. I've had a horse since I was like 3 years old, so like it's something that
oh,
like something I never gave up, you know, and I've always loved.
that's
And
amazing.
Hmm.
I find that it's something that I go and do, and my mind is just quiet. Like, I don't think of anything. I'm just in the moment, and I think that's when you find something that really disconnects you from work. Is when like even like exercising or going for a walk or hanging out with friends, when like your brain is just in the moment, when you're just in that, rather than thinking like, oh God, tomorrow I've got to do like this and this, or I need to email this person. Oh, okay, it's having those sort of moments, even if it's just reading or even if it's doing personal art, that's fantastic. I think everyone's different, and I can tell people what I do to try and help my mental state and make sure that
Hmm.
I kind of am performing. But I think everyone has their different things. Some people it's just gardening, and it can, or just cooking. It can be a really simple thing. I think a lot of people think it's like, I go skydiving and it's like, it doesn't have to be super elaborate. It can just be something that you love.
And it
Hmm.
usually boosts your sort of, no, I don't want to say capability, but it's just like refreshing the energy, right?
Yeah, like
Sort
your
of like you don't,
creativity.
yeah, sort of like your cortisol levels goes down and everything, and you're like, yes,
Yeah,
I can
yeah,
start grass. Yeah,
but it's not
that's
always
awesome.
easy. Like sometimes I find myself right on the edge of a burnout, and like I
Mm,
recognize the signs now where I'm like, especially where I'm not, like, I don't want to be working on personal work, for example, or if I'm, you know, struggling to focus on something, I'm like, okay, these are the warning signals, because you've gone through it before. And I think some like recognizing those signals is important as well. But just because I had it once and managed to get out of it doesn't mean that I come close, sometimes to going back again.
Hmm.
It's a constant like battle trying to make sure you don't slip back into it.
Hmm. Yeah, I almost feel like this is like this trap for us artists that we work like the whole day on commercial work, and then we still
Mhm.
have so many ideas, and we want to work on our personal projects. So we keep drawing and keep thinking,
Yeah.
and it's burning so much energy. Oh, and then let's answer some email from bed, like before going to sleep. Oh, and first thing in the
Yeah.
morning, and so you're constantly working, and you're
Mm.
never getting giving your brain a chance to shut down or just
the
relax.
grinding mentality, right?
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
old days. Let's
Well,
keep it
sometimes you
real.
don't even realize you're grinding. Like you say,
Yeah.
like sometimes you end the workday and you're like, I really want to work on my personal project. And so you do. And then like you work on it for the next 2 weeks. And then like you're suddenly knackered and you're suddenly like, I can't work on my commercial work. And I don't know what the solution is to that, to be honest. It's
Hmm.
like, well, do I just give up doing my personal work? And that isn't necessarily the solution. I think it's such a give and take, isn't it? It's a
Yes.
difficult one.
Hmm.
It's hard, definitely. I don't know. I found myself in a way where like I didn't do personal work for so long. And like probably like, well, so long. I'm saying that it's probably like 6 or 7 months or something. But
Hmm.
I don't know, like sometimes, like for me specifically, like my kind of signs of burnout are when I'm feeling like it's starting to become your usual job, right? And I'm like,
Mm.
okay, I need to rest, right?
Mm.
But
Hmm.
I don't know, like I don't know how you guys feel about it, but like I've noticed and it might be a bit depressing. Don't take it like it's just my experience. Don't take it like, too personally, but I'm like, the longer I'm in it, the less time I have for personal art. I'm like, I want to
Mm.
do it, but I can't, right? Like there's
Yeah.
just so much stuff outside, like that that sort of work-life balance, like it's also very important to have some kind of a person, that also understands it. Because imagine if it
Mhm.
would be the opposite, right? It would
Yeah.
be screwed.
Yeah, and I think finding like an art community is really important.
Yes.
Like, that's why it's nice to, because we've all met each other like through Instagram or, see each other on an art
Yes.
station,
Yes.
and you know, I think that's always really lovely that we kind of all know we're in it together, and I think like you can easily make friends, I think, with other people in the
Mhm,
industry
mhm.
and be able to say to them, because people have like all these discords and things like that, and there's other ones that you can join, and you're kind of able to find community through that. And I think that's really nice.
Mhm, mhm. I still remember the first time I went to an art convention, and I
Um,
didn't know, like two of my friends were there. Patrick obviously weren't there, wasn't there because Patrick doesn't come to conventions.
Patrick's a vampire.
Yeah,
I don't go anywhere.
yeah.
Fair enough.
But it was, I didn't know anyone, and it was like I was almost welcomed into a family.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like this instant connection with everyone, just like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, well, even going to like conventions now, like concept art ones, I'm like, oh God, I don't know anyone, and people like say to me that I went to concept 101, and that was like really lovely, and people are like, oh hi Ellie, that like, you don't feel so like alone anymore, and people are like, oh, I've worked with you on this, and you're like, oh, I don't remember, and it's really nice. I really love that people feel as well that they're able to come and like speak to people. I think we're all a really friendly bunch. Like, a lot of people
Yes.
will, you go up to them and say like, oh hi, like, could I ask you a few questions about how you did this? And like a lot of the time, like, of course. Like, would love to chat to you, and things like that. And I think it's really nice, being able to see that, especially at conventions where you feel like there's this coming together of like the artist community, because we're all so like spread out, aren't we, all over the world?
Yeah, it's
Yes.
such a niche job that is like you have like this kind of sense of community and everybody. I'm not saying, well, not everyone, but like most of us are like very like-minded people.
Mm.
And you also realize how truly small the industry is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Like there
yeah,
might be like you see ArtStation might be like, God damn, this world is big. But when you go to events, you're like, oh, I've worked with this person. I'm like, what?
yeah,
Right? It's almost
yeah.
like how, but it truly is very small.
It is, yeah, it is.
Hmm. Okay, so
Awesome.
Ellie, one last question, like what kind of advice do you have to people starting? I know we talked about portfolios and a lot of mental health stuff, but one last advice to the younger audience.
Yeah, of course. So keep going is a big one. You might see all of the artists that you see have, made it, and we all had a hard time, getting into. It wasn't an overnight success for anyone. And, don't let yourself just be comparing to other artists' work. I think there's that saying, isn't there, that comparison is the thief of joy. So comparing yourself to other artists kind of gets you nowhere. But remember that the artists that you looked up to, they've all had to kind of get here as well. It's not been an easy path, and don't feel like you're behind if you're not in the industry. And at the moment, it's an incredibly difficult time for artists. It doesn't make you any less of an artist at the moment. With what's going on in the industry, um, that your time will come, and you will find your way into the industry. We all do.
Oh, that was lovely. Thank you so
Amazing.
much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you
It's
so much for having me.
thank you very much. It was a pleasure to have you. Thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Especially on days like that. I'm like, God damn, and you've waited for me too for the camera. I'm like, no, sometimes, that things are just working in the opposite direction for some reason. So
I
thank
have
you
to.
again.
The pleasure's
Yes.
all mine.
Thank you so much.
Awesome.